In the cozy town of Evergreen, where maple trees lined the streets and every house had a colorful door, lived a boy named Maximum. Max was 8 years old, with messy brown hair that never stayed combed, bright curious eyes, and a wild spirit that often got him into trouble. He lived with his mother and little sister, Lily, in a bright yellow house with a big backyard full of adventures waiting to happen. But lately, Max felt like a storm was trapped inside his chest. His father had been away for many months working on a big ship far across the ocean. Max missed him terribly. He missed the bedtime stories, the silly dances in the kitchen, and the way his dad would lift him high into the air. Instead of talking about it, Max kept everything bottled up. He growled instead of speaking, stomped instead of walking, and built tall forts in his room where no one could reach him. One rainy afternoon, after arguing with his mother about cleaning his room, Max stormed upstairs. "Nobody understands me," he shouted, slamming his door. He grabbed his favorite wolf costume, fuzzy ears, a bushy tail, and sharp claws, and put it on. Then he picked up his wooden sword and began roaring around his bedroom. "I'll sail away where no one can tell me what to do," he declared. In a burst of imagination, the walls of his room melted away like watercolor paint. The floor turned into wooden planks, and his bed became a mighty sailboat rocking on a vast, sparkling ocean. The rain outside became a wild sea breeze. Max laughed with delight as his boat sailed through golden waves under sky painted in pinks and purples. After sailing for what felt like days and nights, the boat gently bumped against a mysterious shore. Towering trees with leaves as big as umbrellas reached toward the sky. Strange glowing flowers bloomed in every color, and the air smelled sweet like adventure. A wooden sign nailed to a tree read, "Welcome to the island of the wild things." Max stepped onto the soft, mossy ground. Strange but wonderful creatures began to appear from the jungle. They were wild and furry, with horns, scales, claws, and bright, expressive eyes. The biggest one, with shaggy orange fur and gentle blue eyes, stepped forward. "I'm King Roar," the creature said in a deep, rumbling voice. "And these are my wild things. Who are you, little wolf?" "I'm Max," he replied, puffing out his chest. "And I'm the king of my own world now." The wild things cheered and roared. They crowned Max with a crown made of twisted vines and glowing berries. That night, they had the wildest rumpus ever seen. They danced around a huge bonfire, chased each other through the trees, swung from vines, and roared at the moon. Max felt free for the first time in months. No rules. No sadness. Just pure, wild fun. But as the days passed on the island, Max noticed something strange. The wild things, despite their fierce appearance, had trouble expressing how they felt. When little Zipper, a small purple creature with floppy ears, felt scared of the dark, she would hide instead of saying so. When Big Grumble, a green monster with horns, felt lonely, he would stomp around angrily instead of asking for a hug. King Roar himself would roar loudly whenever he felt worried about his friends. One evening, as they sat by the glowing river watching fireflies dance, Max asked, "Why don't you just say how you feel?" King Roar sighed, his big shoulders slumping. "We are wild things. We roar and stomp and run. Speaking with words is hard. What if others laugh? What if they don't understand?" Max thought about his own life, how he had been growling and hiding instead of telling his mother how much he missed Dad. A small seed of understanding planted itself in his heart. The next day, a great challenge came to the island of the wild things. A massive storm of forgetting blew in from the sea. Dark clouds swirled overhead, and whispering winds tried to steal everyone's memories and feelings. The wild things grew frightened. They roared and hid, but the storm only grew stronger. "We must face it together," Max shouted. But the wild things were too scared to speak up. Zipper hid in a cave. Grumble stomped in circles. King Roar roared so loudly that trees shook, but it didn't stop the storm. Max realized this was his moment. He climbed onto a tall rock and called everyone together. "I used to be like you," he said bravely. "I kept my sadness about my dad inside, and it made me angry. But imagination helps us express what's in our hearts." He took a deep breath and began to tell his story. Using his wooden sword like a conductor's baton, Max painted pictures in the air with his words. He described the empty chair at dinner, the quiet nights without stories, and the big hole in his heart. As he spoke, colorful images bloomed around him, imaginary scenes of his father's ship, their happy dances, and the warm hugs he missed. The wild things watched in wonder. Slowly, they began to join in. Zipper stepped out of her cave. "I'm scared of the storm because it's loud and dark," she whispered. The moment she said it, a small glowing shield of light appeared around her. Grumble stopped stomping. "I feel lonely when my friends hide," he admitted in a surprisingly soft voice. A warm light bloomed around him too. One by one, the wild things used their imaginations to express their feelings. They created beautiful, wild pictures in the air, some funny, some sad, some hopeful. King Roar told how he worried about keeping everyone safe. As they shared, the storm of forgetting began to weaken. The dark clouds lightened, and the winds calmed. Max grinned. "See? Imagination helps us expression. When we share what's inside, even the scary things lose their power." The wild things roared with joy, this time not in anger, but in celebration. They threw the biggest, happiest rumpus yet, but now it was filled with laughter, stories, and open hearts. They danced under the clearing sky as stars twinkled above. As the storm completely vanished, a magical doorway appeared near the shore, a shimmering portal back to Max's bedroom. King Roar placed a gentle paw on Max's shoulder. "You have taught us something important, little king," he said. "Imagination is not just for play. It helps us understand ourselves and each other." Max felt a warm glow in his chest. "I think I'm ready to go home now." The wild things gathered around him for one last hug. Zipper gave him a glowing flower that never wilted. Grumble made him a necklace of special shells. King Roar gave him a big, fuzzy hug that felt like being wrapped in a warm blanket. "Remember," King Roar said, "you can always visit us in your imagination whenever you need to roar or share your feelings." Max sailed back across the ocean on his bedboat. When he opened his eyes, he was back in his bedroom. The rain had stopped, and soft sunlight streamed through the window. His mother was gently knocking on the door. "Max. Dinner's ready, sweetheart." Max opened the door, still wearing his wolf costume. Instead of growling, he ran and hugged his mother tightly. "I miss Dad a lot," he said, his voice a little shaky. "It makes me feel angry and sad at the same time." His mother's eyes softened with surprise and love. She hugged him back even tighter. "I miss him too. Let's talk about it together, okay? We can write him a letter tonight and use our imaginations to make it really special." That evening, Max and his mother sat at the kitchen table with Lily. They drew pictures, told funny stories about Dad, and wrote a long letter filled with their feelings. Max used his wild imagination to describe the adventures they would have when Dad came home. For the first time in months, the storm inside his chest felt calm. The next day at school, when his friend asked why he seemed happier, Max told a short version of his adventure with the wild things. His classmates listened with wide eyes. Soon, they were all sharing their own feelings and creating imaginary stories together during recess. Word spread through Evergreen. Children began using their imaginations more freely, to express sadness, excitement, worries, and dreams. Teachers noticed the change. Families talked more openly. Even the grown-ups started painting, writing, and dreaming again. Months later, when Max's father finally returned home, the whole family had a grand celebration. Max put on his wolf costume and led everyone in a wild but joyful rumpus in the backyard. His father laughed loudly and joined in, lifting Max high into the air just like old times. That night, as Max lay in bed, he closed his eyes and visited the island of the wild things in his dreams. The creatures were thriving, happier, more open, and full of colorful stories. King Roar waved at him from across the glowing river. "Thank you, Max," the wild things called together. Max smiled in his sleep. He had learned that imagination was a powerful tool. It helped him express the big feelings he didn't know how to say with plain words. It turned anger into understanding, fear into courage, and loneliness into connection. From that day on, whenever Max felt a storm brewing inside, he would close his eyes, put on his wolf ears, and sail in his imagination to where the wild things were. There, he would roar, dance, and share his heart freely. and the world around him became a little wilder, kinder, and brighter because of it.